Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating, but I have to say, high-stakes area of pharmacology. We're talking about the drugs that affect the male reproductive system.
hmm
It seems like a compact topic, but it is just absolutely packed with potent hormones, major safety flags, and some really critical interactions.
That's exactly right. And our goal today isn't to, read a textbook to you. It's to give you the ultimate shortcut. We are distilling the most essential knowledge from our source material here.
Which is a chapter summary focused on nursing pharmacology.
Right. The whole point is to make sure you instantly grasp the purpose, the mechanism, and, most importantly, the non-negotiable safety considerations for three powerful drug classes:
And those are?
androgens, anabolic steroids, and the treatments for erectile dysfunction.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation. I think before we go any further, we really need to define the difference between the natural and the synthetic, right?
Precisely. You got to start there. First, you have androgens. These are the natural male sex hormones, primarily testosterone, made in the testes.
And they drive what are called androgenic effects.
Exactly, the androgenic effect. So that's the development of male characteristics. Think deepening voice, hair distribution, genital development, that sort of thing.
And then on the other side, you have the anabolic steroids.
Right. Anabolic steroids are, you can think of them as chemical cousins of testosterone. They've been engineered to try and maximize the anabolic effect.
Which is the protein building part.
The protein building, tissue repairing effect, exactly. While at the same time trying to minimize those pure androgenic effects we just mentioned.
But I'm guessing they're still very powerful.
Oh, make no mistake. Both classes are hugely potent, and they carry a lot of overlapping risks.
Okay, so let's zoom in on our natural prototype then, testosterone. When we talk about its therapeutic actions, what's the headline?
Well, the headline is that it's a foundational metabolic engine. Clinically, it's used for replacement therapy when the testes are underdeveloped, a condition called hypogonadism.
Okay.
It also stimulates red blood cell production, so it can be useful in certain anemias. And metabolically, it ramps up protein anabolism, so tissue building, while helping the body hold on to certain necessary electrolytes.
I noticed an interesting application in the sources, something that seemed a little counterintuitive to me. Testosterone is sometimes used to treat certain breast cancers.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
Hmm.
But yes, in a very small number of hormone-sensitive cases, it can be used palliatively. Now, on the synthetic side of things,
Danazol.
danazol, right?
Okay.
This synthetic androgen is most commonly used in women to treat conditions like endometriosis, fibrocystic breast disease, and also hereditary angioedema.
And how does that work?
It works by essentially turning down the communication between the brain and the ovaries. It inhibits the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Wow. That is a serious hormonal adjustment. So, since we are talking about really potent drugs, let's go straight to the safety warnings. What does a learner absolutely have to know about androgens?
First thing, the contraindications are strict. Absolutely no use during pregnancy or lactation. The risk of harm to the baby is just too high.
Okay.
And no use in men with prostate or breast cancer. You also need to be very cautious if the patient have any underlying liver or heart disease.
So here's where it gets really interesting and, to be honest, a little scary. There's a specific black box warning for the topical forms of testosterone, the gels, the patches.
Yes,
This sounds like a massive safety responsibility for literally anyone who might be near the patient.
it is life-altering if it's ignored. Topical testosterone carries that black box warning because there is a serious risk of virilization,
And virilization is.
the development of male characteristics in people who shouldn't have them. In this case, in children who come into contact with the drug. And this can happen from just touching the treated skin or even the clothing of the man who's using it.
So the safety mandate is crystal clear then. Cover all application areas if you might touch a child, and any clothing that has touched the site has to be washed before anyone else can encounter it. It's a literal physical hazard.
Absolutely. And speaking of hazards, the text brings up a really critical public health issue. You might remember the heavy media advertising around low T syndrome a few years back.
Oh yeah, it was everywhere.
That push led to widespread, and I mean widespread, unapproved use of testosterone for really vague symptoms like fatigue or low energy.
And what was the result of all that unapproved use?
The FDA had to step in. They had to, because subsequent research showed a very concerning increase in cardiovascular risks. We're talking myocardial infarction, stroke, and life-threatening clots, like DVT and pulmonary embolism.
So the takeaway is?
The official position now is that these drugs must be used strictly for their approved indications. Specifically, documented hypogonadism, not just, an age-related decline.
That is a powerful lesson in balancing commercial interests with clinical safety. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about anabolic steroids, with oxandrolone as the prototype. So if androgens are for replacement, anabolics are more like specialized tissue repairers.
That's a great way to put it, yes. Therapeutically, we use them to promote weight gain and tissue repair after, say, a major trauma, a big surgery, or chronic infections.
Mhm.
They are also vital for patients on long-term corticosteroids to reverse the protein breakdown those drugs cause.
But we all know the reputation of anabolic steroids is tied to one thing, and that's abuse.
It is. They are Class 3 controlled substances, but they're very frequently abused for rapid increases in muscle mass and strength, especially in athletics. The crucial point here for you, the learner, is that the doses used illicitly are. They're deadly.
And the adverse effects profile makes this terrifyingly clear. A lot of these risks overlap with standard androgens, too.
All right, let's synthesize those risks. High doses, whether they're therapeutic or abusive, carry black box warnings for potentially fatal outcomes. We're talking liver tumors and hepatitis and severe blood lipid changes that just dramatically increase the risk of coronary artery disease.
And you mentioned the profound hormonal disruption they cause, which is, it's visible depending on who the user is.
It is. In prepubertal boys, you see virilization and premature phallic enlargement. In adult men, you see signs of just too much androgen. So gynecomastia, testicular atrophy, and priapism, those painful continual erections.
And for women?
For women, the masculinizing effects are prominent. Hoarseness, a deepening of the voice, clitoral enlargement. It's very serious.
This leads us right into the lifespan considerations, especially for children. I mean, these steroids can literally interfere with their growth,
They affect epiphyseal closure.
the growth plates in the bones.
Exactly. For any child taking anabolic steroids, close monitoring is mandatory. Specifically, using hand and wrist radiographs every 6 months to track their long bone growth.
And if you see a problem,
If signs of precocious puberty emerge, the drug has to be stopped immediately.
what about older adults? They're often dealing with heart or liver issues already.
They are an incredibly high-risk group. Androgens aggravate fluid retention, which worsens conditions like hypertension or heart failure. Plus, because they can enlarge the prostate, they dramatically worsen the urinary difficulties that are common with BPH.
So you have to adjust the dose.
Almost always. The dose often must be reduced because of that concurrent risk of liver dysfunction.
Before we move on, the source also raises a flag about so-called natural alternatives that are advertised alongside these compounds.
Yes, and we have to caution you about this. There's a big advertising push for these non-prescription supplements like creatine, wild yam, bee pollen.
And the problem is,
The scientific evidence for their efficacy is, well, generally absent, and they carry known risks. Creatine, for example, interacts with NSAIDs and can really stress the kidneys. Wild yam is known to be hepatotoxic. They're not safe substitutes.
okay, good warning. Let's move on to our final therapeutic area. Drugs for treating penile erectile dysfunction, or ED.
All right, so ED is simply the failure of the corpus cavernosum, that's the spongy tissue in the penis, to fill with blood. It's often related to aging or vascular or even neurological problems. The text identifies two primary approaches.
The first one is very localized. It's a prostaglandin called alprostedil.
Alprostedil, yeah. It's often administered by injection directly into the corpus cavernosum. It acts locally, relaxing the vascular smooth muscle right there, which facilitates blood flow.
And the side effects are also local, I assume?
They are pain, risk of infection, or priapism.
But the most common, and let's face it, famous approach are the oral medications. The PDE5 inhibitors with sildenafil or Viagra as the prototype. So how do they actually work in simple terms?
Okay, think of it this way. During sexual stimulation, a chemical messenger called CGMP increases. That's what relaxes the smooth muscle and allows blood to rush in.
Okay, so CGMP is the go signal.
It's the go signal. But the body has a cleanup enzyme, PDE5, that breaks down CGMP. It essentially deflates the erection.
So the drug sildenafil does what then?
Sildenafil is a selective inhibitor of that PDE5 cleanup crew. It stops the breakdown of CGMP, which sustains the smooth muscle relaxation and promotes blood flow. It basically locks the door on the deflating enzyme.
So if you are stimulated, the erection is maximized and sustained.
That's the mechanism.
And this mechanism is so powerful that these drugs have a
totally separate use, yeah, in both men and women.
Right.
That vasodilation property makes sildenafil and tadalafil essential for treating pulmonary arterial hypertension, PAH. It relaxes the smooth muscle and the arteries of the lungs, lowering the blood pressure there.
Let's compare the pharmacokinetics. The difference in duration is incredible.
It really is. Sildenafil and vardenafil have a rapid onset, maybe 30 minutes, and they last about 4 hours, so they require some careful timing.
But then there's tadalafil.
Tadalafil, however, has an onset of about 45 minutes, but it boasts an impressive 36-hour duration.
36 hours.
Yes, that's why it's often called the weekend pill. It offers much, much greater flexibility.
The source also flags 2 dietary factors that can dramatically affect this class of drugs.
And you have to know these first. High-fat meals. They will significantly delay absorption, which means your timing is off.
Okay, that's practical. But the second one sounds more serious.
It is. The serious warning is about grapefruit juice. It decreases the metabolism of the PDE5 inhibitor, which can lead to toxic serum levels.
Wow.
And patients need to be told that it takes a full 48 hours for the body to process grapefruit juice. So the interaction risk isn't just, right after you drink it.
Okay, now for what might be the single most critical safety warning in this entire deep dive. This is a fatal drug interaction we're about to discuss.
This is a non-negotiable, must-know safety point. PDE5 inhibitors absolutely, under no circumstances, can be taken with organic nitrates.
Like nitroglycerin.
Like nitroglycerin, yes. If a patient is using nitrates, maybe for chest pain, and they combine it with sildenafil or any other PDE5 inhibitor, you get a catastrophic, life-threatening drop in blood pressure.
And this risk also applies to another class of drugs?
Yes, this severe hypotension is also a major risk when combined with most alpha-adrenergic blockers. This interaction must be screened for relentlessly. It's that important.
Beyond that life-threatening interaction, what are the more common adverse effects?
Well, headache and flushing are very common. They relate directly to that generalized vascular relaxation. We also see dyspepsia or indigestion. Less commonly, but very seriously, patients have reported a sudden loss of vision or hearing. That requires immediate reporting.
Okay, so for our final segment, let's synthesize all of this into some actionable, practical takeaways. What are the key assessments that unify these 3 powerful drug classes?
Well, because of that hepatotoxic risk from androgens and anabolic steroids, consistent monitoring of baseline and periodic liver function tests is absolutely essential. And due to the effects on fluid balance and blood pressure across all the classes, we also monitor cardiovascular status very carefully. Blood pressure, checking for edema, assessing cardiac sounds.
And specifically for monitoring the steroid classes.
For those, you need a good visual assessment. You're tracking changes in skin, hair distribution, and libido to detect signs of virilization or excessive androgenic effects. And again, the reminder for children.
The x-rays.
Schedule and follow through with those long bone x-rays to check for premature growth plate closure.
So what does this all mean for the patient conversation? What are the essential safety instructions we have to drill home?
First, teach patients that if they get GI upset from oral drugs, they can try taking them with food. Simple, but effective.
And
Second, you have to stress the immediate reporting of specific, severe adverse effects. Any continual painful erection priapism. Any swelling, any yellowing of the skin which could indicate liver issues. Chest pain, difficulty breathing. All immediate calls.
And the big one.
And above all else, reinforce the absolute necessity of avoiding those fatal drug interactions. Specifically, that lethal combination of PDE5 inhibitors and nitrates.
This deep dive really highlights the challenge that healthcare providers face. You're dealing with potent pharmacology, you're managing drugs that are targets for abuse like anabolic steroids, and you're navigating patient demand that's driven by advertising for unapproved uses, like that low-T phenomenon.
The core mission hasn't changed. It remains patient safety against both potent drugs and, frankly, pervasive misinformation. Understanding the mechanism and the interactions of these agents is the only way to fulfill that duty of care.
A truly critical deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the pharmacology of the male reproductive system.